Welcome to the Zest podcast, the podcast that flips the script on traditional coaching. Here, we challenge the status quo by turning coaching relationships on their heads. Instead of the usual dynamic where coaches lead the way, we give the coachee the mic. Each episode, a coachee interviews their coach, diving into topics they're both passionate about, be it leadership, personal growth, or navigating challenges such as neurodiversity in the workplace. Our unique format inspires authentic conversations, shared learning, and fresh perspectives. We are showcasing the dynamic chemistry that comes from real-world coaching relationships. The mission is to disrupt power dynamics, spark curiosity, and offer you inspiring, zesty insights into work, life, and everything in between. So join us as we explore bold ideas, unfiltered stories, and the transformative power of coaching, zesty style.
So, hi, I'm Dr. Anna Kane, founder and director of Zest Psychology, and today I'm in the host chair of the podcast. So in this podcast, we're flipping the power dynamics, inviting our clients to sit in the host chair and engage our coaches in a topic of interest that's shared by both client and coach. Today's podcast is a little different as I'm getting together with 3 psychologists who joined Zest's Inclusive Coaching Skills Foundation Programme, ICSF. So it's going to be filled with rich content, sharing what we explored on the programme and leaning into the research areas each of these psychologists bring to the table. So to set the scene, I'm going to share a bit about the programme, why we set it up, and then introduce and get to meet the psychologists. We've got some questions for them, both from the programme's perspective and also a few questions from our followers and on LinkedIn and Instagram. So thanks to those who took time to submit a question. So I'd like to start by explaining what the ICSF programme is and why we set it up, just to set the scene for you. So as an executive coach, myself, I have chemistry conversations with potential coaching clients where they get to explain what they want from coaching in an initial get to know each other chat. Now, all too often, I hear that I stood out from a sea of homogenous looking coaches. In fact, I remember one person explicitly told me they chose me as a coach because I didn't look like one. And so I often find myself coaching people from underrepresented groups. And I think part of the reason for this is that I am from a few underrepresented groups myself. I'm queer, I'm gender fluid, and I'm neurodivergent. And I love working with people from underrepresented groups. But I do feel that the current offering's not good enough. People need a choice, and they need to be seeing people like themselves in their choices of a coach. So I do often coach people of colour, and I know that I've been chosen in absence of a coach of colour. And so that means that these coachees in that position are having to settle for someone who gets what it's like to come from a minoritized group rather than someone who more accurately reflects their identity and lived experiences. So our aim with this programme was to pioneer a groundbreaking initiative that addressed this underrepresentation in the executive coaching industry. So to open up or to expand the field of coaching so that people had more choice from the coaches available to them. So we curated a tailored development program to facilitate entry of master degree occupational psychology and organizational psychology graduates from backgrounds that are currently underrepresented in the executive coaching field. So our initiative attracted funding from Brighton and Hove City Council's Shared Prosperity Fund. And I'm proud to say that I reached out to my network and secured the pro bono time of 6 amazing coach trainer facilitators. So first off, I want to shift the focus and introduce each of the psychologists with me today. And later I'll share more about the program to inform our conversation. But our coaches that we're chatting with today, they're all brilliant people, and I want to share with you something about each of them so before you meet them, their research areas, and then we'll start to hear from them. So I'll come to Zoe first. Hi, Zoe.
Hello, Anna.
Hello. So let me introduce Zoe. So Zoe Nwosu is an organisational psychologist and coach with interests in supporting the career development of those from underrepresented groups and those undertaking career transitions. Having undergone a career transition herself, she's able to understand and relate to the challenges and aspirations of her clients. Zoe has an MSc in organisational psychology, and she uses her skills and experience to empower her clients in their career journeys. So Zoe's MSc research and study explored the career barriers that minoritised ethnic employees experience and how the ideal worker norm contextualises these barriers. It problematised the ideal worker as a power structure that exists and continues to underlie and reproduce inequalities in organisations and within careers. Her findings centred around three main themes that demonstrate the levels of inequality, inequity, and marginalisation that these employees experience within different contexts because they are different or are not the ideal worker, therefore reaffirming the need for organisations and managers to embrace the importance of inclusive leadership and culture. So, Zoe, what drew you to take part in the ICSF programme?
Thank you, Anna. I think I want to start by saying that it was such a privilege to have been part of the ICSF program, and the way it happened, because at the time I was part of Zest. I was doing an internship with Zest, so it was a real privilege. I shared my interest in coaching with you, Anna, and the team. And I think a few other people in the team were quite interested in coaching. And at the time, I hadn't had any training, but it was something that, if the opportunity presented itself, that I would be interested in. And as it were, you had plans and you had thoughts. Zest was thinking of doing that sort of a training. So it was great, because I started as part of the conversation, and then which then led to the actual training program, which was really beneficial for me. For me, it was like a really good foundation to kicking off my career in coaching. And I think the most striking thing for me was that it gave opportunity for people from underrepresented groups to actually be able to afford that training, and also stand as representatives to people in similar from similar backgrounds. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I remember those. I remember those days when we were kind of co-creating, or we were kind of thinking aspirationally, weren't we?
Yes,
And co-creating why the program was important and what we wanted it to look like. So they were good conversations, weren't they?
certainly, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Zoe. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from you soon. I'm going to move on now and introduce Tom. So hi, Tom. Hello, you. I think you just hello. The
Hi.
old funny game of Mike's on mute, Mike's not on mute. Hello, welcome to the podcast, Tom. So
Thank
let
you.
me introduce Tom. So he's a freelance business psychologist and organizational development consultant. So Tom partners with organisations across the UK and internationally and across all sectors of employment, providing psychologically informed training, coaching and organisational development consultancy. So Tom specialises in neurodiversity in the workplace and is recognised for his expertise in this area. Tom's recent research focused on the workplace experiences of people diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood. And in undertaking this qualitative study, Tom interviewed 12 participants. Three key themes were developed from the data, but what struck Tom as particularly significant was that for all the participants, the interviews were the first opportunity, having been diagnosed with ADHD, to explore this aspect of their identity in depth. So the interviews illustrated the workplace challenges faced by the participants and prompted Tom to consider the value of coaching as a means to support neurodivergent people with self-understanding, self-acceptance, and developing a strengths-based understanding of self. So, Tom, welcome again. Same question to you as to Zoe. What drew you to take part in the ICSF programme?
I think probably the name as much as anything else, Anna. I mean, I think that the suggestion that coaching might not be inclusive was something that I think was really significant. And I think typically, if we look at some of the coaching programs that are out there, they follow a very specific model. And I sometimes wonder who that model works for. And I think reflecting particularly on my research, the possibility that for certain groups, particularly within the workplace, the need for coaching to be done slightly differently and maybe to challenge the status quo was something that I found quite attractive. And looking at the program itself, the breadth of the program was really something that I was particularly drawn to, because I think because everybody was approaching this from the perspective of psychology, it was an opportunity to really draw from different dimensions and different aspects of psychology to, I guess, use that breadth of theory and understanding to maybe push the boundaries of coaching a little bit so that they were more inclusive and provided people with a possibility for coaching that maybe pre-existing models didn't particularly serve.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And like for me, challenging the status quo is a line I have in my coaching profile often. It's one that really appeals to me. It's really fascinating to hear that that's one of the things that drew you to the program, that it was just pushing the boundaries in a healthy way. So yeah, great. Thank you, Tom. Lovely to meet you here. Well, have you here today, not meet you. Obviously, we know each other. So now then, on last but very not at all least, Rach. So hi, Rach.
Hi Anna, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So let me introduce you now. So Rachel Smith's a freelance business psychologist and PhD researcher. Her work focuses on how we navigate difficult conversations in the workplace, particularly those shaped by health, identity, and inclusion. Bridging organisational research with lived experience, Rachel advocates for health inclusion and supports both organisations and employees in fostering more equitable and psychologically safe environments. Her practice is rooted in reflective approaches and inclusive frameworks that aim to create spaces where individuals feel heard, valued, and empowered to engage in meaningful dialogue. Her work and research explores the dynamics of difficult conversations, what makes them hard, how we navigate them, and the emotional and relational impact they carry. She initially came to this through the lens of health-related conversations in the workplace, particularly the challenges of speaking up or being heard. But she quickly realised these issues aren't isolated. They reflect broader organisational dynamics that affect employees from other marginalised and underrepresented groups as well. So, Rach, what drew you to take part in the ICSF program?
So, in a way, similar to Zoe, I was involved in the early conceptualization of the program, the early conversations where we were talking about what it might be, what it might look like, because I was working as a permanent psychologist at Zest at the time. But I think what's interesting for me is that I wasn't necessarily looking to become a certified coach, or didn't ever see myself becoming a coach. But what drew me to the program was being able to look at the skills that I could gain from taking part and how I might apply them to my work and my research in a broader context. So, as you've already said, my work has always been focused on the emotional and relational and complex dynamics of difficult workplace conversations, particularly those shaped by identity, health, and inclusion. And for me, this program offered a way to approach those conversations differently and use that coaching lens and that coaching approach that's rooted in equity and reflection. But it also aligns with my values around disrupting dominant narratives and broadening the landscape of who gets to hold space in professional settings. And that's what really excited me about it. So yeah, so not really wanting to become a coach necessarily, but seeing the value in the skills that I could learn and apply to my broader work.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember those conversations well, as well as, the ones that Zoe was a part of too. And like, it's just stopping to reflect upon, okay, taking part in a coaching program, but don't want to become a coach. You might think, what's the point? But there's so much to be learned from those conversations, reflections, and approaches that can be applied in so many different places that I was really pleased that we were able to, like, together, like, discuss that in an open and honest way. In a way we were role modeling what some of your research does about having an honest conversation of, well, I don't actually want to be a coach, but this opportunity is really great in different ways. Can it still work? And yes, absolutely. We made sure that there was a shared understanding about who was turning up for the coaching training and why and what they wanted to get from it. And so for me, it just made me really proud of the program that it 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 was role modeling really positive, healthy, open conversations before it even got started.
Absolutely.
So, okay, great. Well, it's good to get you all introduced. So, I'm going to say a bit more about the program and then come back to you all. So, in terms of the program, we covered a number of topics with a number of experts, as I've already shared with the listeners, saying that we attracted some really brilliant expert coaches who came and facilitated and taught on the program. So we started with coaching foundations and practical considerations with Dr. Roxane Gervais. Went on to coaching models with Dr. Joe Gray. Continued personal development for coaches was next up, and that was with myself. Then Zareen Jacob ran a session on coaching skills, followed by well-being with Dr. Charlie Iyer. Self as tool, back with myself again. And then on to Caroline Katz, who spent time with you talking about how to deal with barriers to effective and meaningful coaching conversations. And then finally, with Dame Dr. Neslin Watson-Duray. So not only is she a doctor, but she has a CBE, and she's spent time with you exploring Time for Thinking, Nancy Klein's work. So some really interesting topics that were explored. And what I loved about the program was that it wasn't really a typical teaching program. So you all went off and did some research before each of the sessions, and you had a bit of a conversation between you, and there was more than the three of you on the program. We started out with 8, and between you didn't double up too much in terms of the research, and then you brought back what you'd researched about the topic, shared that with each other and created conversation, meaningful conversation as a group, and with the facilitator sharing their expertise. So it was in a way that I felt like that really shifted the power dynamics as well, because it wasn't just about an expert coming along and telling you what they know. You were put in the seat of experts as well. And then to add to that, you've all got your own areas of research. So really like a really rich like bed of conversation. So I want to ask you about all your research individually. So Rachel, I'm going to come back to you. What did the program add to your research around, because I know you were doing your PhD at the time. You're just finishing up now, aren't you? What did the program add to your research around the dynamics of difficult dialogue for individuals from marginalised and underrepresented groups?
Yeah, so an interesting question and quite a lot, I think. But I'll try and capture it. The thing that I think really stood out for me was how coaching, when done inclusively, it offers a space for co-created safety and reflection. And that's something that's been really strong and resonates a lot with the research that I've been doing, is that one of the largest barriers for having difficult conversations in the workplace is around the relational and organizational safety to just begin having those conversations. And so this program, it sort of identified the tools and the frameworks that could be used in an organizational setting to approach difficult conversations through a coaching approach with a coaching lens, but not necessarily by people who are coaches. So those transferable skills, again, that can be brought into an organization and used by anybody to facilitate these kinds of challenging conversations. Particularly sort of Caroline Katz's session on working on the barriers of meaningful conversations really resonated with my research, because obviously there are a lot of barriers in having difficult conversations in the workplace, and sort of how to overcome those, how to challenge them, how to move around those was just really insightful for me, and it gave me a lot of useful tools that I can put into practice within the work that I do. And then also Dame Neslin's work on time to think. One of the things that comes up a lot is just having that space to really be listened to be heard, to have the voice of the person that needs to be heard, give them space for that. And often we don't know how to provide that. And that was a really interesting session for me, because it was all about silence and the power of silence, and just really stepping back and hearing people and giving them time to bring something to the conversation. And it was a little bit uncomfortable at times, sort of just sat there with someone waiting for you to speak and for you to process your thoughts. But it was just really powerful for me to kind of experience that myself, and then be able to apply that to the work that I have done. So probably touched on several things there, but they were probably the key things.
Yeah. And it, like, because Caroline talked about defense mechanisms, didn't she? She talked about how we have defenses in place, and those defenses stop those meaningful conversations. And then, but then it's like, okay, so if you take those defense mechanisms down, what happens? You need something to replace a defense mechanism, don't you? And that the work of Nancy Klein and what Dame Neslin did with you, I love the fact that silence is, it's the simplest form, it's the simplest approach, but sometimes it can be the most challenging and difficult one to do, because society just doesn't promote it or encourage it. And I think if you watch like American TV, they're all like busy talking all over each other, and that's their idea of having a good time. And so the narrative in society doesn't point us towards silence as a simple, effective way to connect. So it's counterintuitive, isn't it? But very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that I found in my research, is people often feel the need to solve problems, and often people don't need a solution straight away. They just need to be heard. That's the first step, giving someone that space to be heard. And that's where that really came in for me, was that silence, that reframing of it as not, it could still be a discomfort in some senses, but it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. It's actually a really useful and helpful tool to use to give people what they need to be able to have that space to think before they speak, and not having to sort of jump in and fill the gaps with sometimes useless advice or guidance that's not being asked for, I guess. So
Yeah, yeah. And that discomfort, I think discomfort is a really important part of coaching conversations and other meaningful conversations, because it means that people are turning towards the issue. And, the reason why they haven't turned towards it before, there could be many reasons, but discomfort will be one of them. So giving them that safe space to be comfortable with the uncomfortable is really important. Lovely. Thank you, Rach. We'll be hearing more from you again. But I just want to go around and hear from Zoe and Tom as well about the connections for them in their research. So Zoe, in your research, you mentioned levels of inequality, inequity, and marginalisation that minoritized ethnic employees experience because they are different or not the ideal worker. So what did you learn on the programme that supports your work in this area?
Thanks very much, Anna. And I think to answer that question, I want to talk a little bit about my research and what were the findings and things like that. Then I will relate it to how the coaching training that I've done is actually beneficial. So my research looked at the experiences of ethnic minoritized employees, and the focus of it was the ideal worker, which I would describe as a culturally invented sort of prototype or an expectation from an organization of who fits into a role or who fits into that organization. And so the ideal worker, to me, and it's sort of a power structure, because then it stands as a limitation, because people are expecting people to be a certain way. So for the ethnic minoritized people that I spoke to, employees that I interviewed, a lot of them felt that they weren't an ideal fit. They weren't the ideal worker. They didn't feel like they were accepted as the ideal worker. And so that was one of the themes that came out, that they're not the ideal worker context, fitting into the mold. So they felt like they didn't fit into that mode, that cultural expectation. And then another theme was being career judged before you know me. And some of the sub themes there were I'm not like you, I'm stereotyped. Or, being and another one was the privileged against the ethnic other. So, things like this, and it's where the other one is pushed against the career wall. And these are, themes that resonated with most of the people that I interviewed. And basically, it's where people are feeling that they're treated differently because of who they are, because of how they're present, because they're not what the preferred. And it can get exhausting. And some of the things that showed up in my research is where people are feeling that they haven't got equal access to resources and things like that. So they have to try harder to prove themselves as competent, as deserving, as the ideal. So all of these things, they then reshape their identity. their professional identity. They begin to, impact their sense of self, their sense of worth, their value, and all of that. And it can be quite exhausting, energy depreciating. They feel constantly judged for who they are or not. So where coaching then comes in for me is that, it was quite a privilege to be a part of this training. And, I've always wanted to sort of help support people in that way, to sort of uh, understand where they are in their career and where they want to be. So going from point A to B, and for the underrepresented person and the clients that I deal with, we're able to present to them a safe space where they can come in and be present as they are, where they can come in and then know that they're going to be heard, they're not going to be judged. It's really a safe space where they can feel like they've got a thinking partner who can relate with some of the things that they've gone through. Maybe not like for like, but has an understanding, and it puts them in a comfortable place to be very vulnerable. So it's some of the things, talking about Zarin's uh, session about coaching skills. Some of the coaching skills are being able to reframe, change the lenses, because at this point they believe what has been tagged about them. So their professional identity, they believe different. They believe, oh, I'm not the accepted, I'm not the one, I am incompetent, I'm not good enough. But then they need to come in a space where they can be given that opportunity to start reframing, building their confidence, understanding that, no, this is who I am. And this is, I can go from point A to B. I can actually do this, and start breaking those barriers that actually exist for them. So I found this is some of the things that I picked up from the course, and how I also help my clients to support them through their careers.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And amazing is a terrible word to use because it's heartbreaking, isn't it? To be in these spaces and to, hear people's stories about how they've felt oppressed or how they've felt unable to show up as they are because it's not accepted, it's not valued, it's not appreciated. And like the term you used, pushed up against the career wall. Say a bit more about that, Zoe. What does that mean to
Yeah.
people?
So it was a sort of theme again that showed up. So pushed against the career wall, where they're hitting their heads constantly. Whatever they do, they're not having breakthroughs. They're not getting those opportunities for management. To management opportunities. They're not
Yeah.
given the same access to. They're mistrusted.
Mm,
They're
mm,
judged
yeah.
as undeserving.
Yeah.
So, whatever they do, and therefore, because of that, they're made to work harder to
Yeah.
prove that they're competent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a difficult place and it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. It
Lack,
is
you
exhausting.
lose all the motivation that you've got. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's that that problem, isn't there? Or I'm not even sure if it's a dilemma, but about, if I turn up as me and that gets rejected, then I turn up as someone else. What if that gets rejected? Like this kind of constant trying to second guess how the workplace is going to be, how people are going to respond to you. You turn up as yourself, it's not as well received as it should be. You turn up with a mask, and then,
Mm,
okay, if that's accepted, then that still hurts the part that really wants to be seen. And if it's
that's right.
rejected, then you're thinking, well, I'm trying my best here, and you're still not accepting me with the masks that I'm putting on, or my extra effort that I'm putting in. So it's a real challenge, and I'm curious about um, the fact that, if people have to show up to work, putting all that extra effort in, not showing up as themselves, not feeling like who they are is fully welcomed. How do you break that down in a coaching environment? I know you said about a safe space, but there's a few layers to get beneath before you can have those like real honest conversations, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it involves, first of all, somebody who can relate, sort of, and somebody who's not willing to judge, and having been able to create that space to just give them space to think and to hear them out, to
Mm.
to make them feel heard. And it's usually a process. It can take a few sessions for them to feel okay, to
Yeah,
unbutton and start dealing with the things that they feel that are limitations, and then start um identifying what options that they have, because
mm,
they do have options.
yeah. And do you find yourself sharing some of your experiences to help them feel seen?
In certain cases, yeah. I mean, not all the time, but
No.
it goes back to using self as a tool, which was one of the things that we dealt with. So in some cases, you might need to share your experience, and that brings it sort of down home for them, because they can see that, oh yeah, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no. So it has to be done wisely, doesn't it? But it can have a
Yes,
powerful impact.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Lovely. Thank you, Zoe. So many
Thank
more
you.
questions for you, but I'm
Thank
going to
you.
move on to Tom and just hear from Tom for a bit. Um, so Tom, your research prompted you to consider the value of coaching as a means to support neurodivergent people. What particular aspects of the program supported this insight and practice for you?
Um, I guess it's difficult to pick out an individual sort of aspect of the program, and because the sum of its parts was significant. Um, but I think looking at the different modules or the different components of the program, I think looking at Caroline Katz's sessions around barriers, self as tool, time for thinking, Joe Gray's coaching models as well were probably some of the things that really kind of resonated with my research. So if I try and put that into some kind of context, one of the things that on reflection in my research, when I put a call out for participants, I was quite open that I was a neurodivergent person with a combined type diagnosis of ADHD. And I think that was without question helpful in the relationship that I was then able to have with the participants in my study. And in fact, on more than one occasion across the interviews, it came up that um, this was the first time that people had had the opportunity to discuss their ADHD. So my participants were late diagnosed, or people diagnosed in adulthood with ADHD. And so upon reflection, I was looking at these conversations almost as the outset of a coaching conversation in many respects, because there was an exploration of where people had got to in terms of their diagnosis and really where they might go next. And I think when you look at coaching, I think it can be quite seductive in some respects, in that it's, what are we going to do? What are we going to do that's going to change things? And I think one of the things that struck me about my participants was that there needed to be an understanding of where they'd come from, and where they were and where they needed to go. So the idea that we start a conversation, it's like, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, there needs to be a bit of unloading. And so if we took Joe Gray's coaching model sessions, for example, and Joe's kind of reworked the GROW, the fairly well-known GROW model, and reworked it to what she describes as GROW with steroids. That was really significant for me as a coach, because what it allowed me to do was to consider the possibility of ripping up the rule book, which I'm pretty good at doing, but doing that with confidence and understanding there's a need to actually personalize the coaching experience, that the idea that we take a kind of a neat flow diagram off the shelf and run people through it doesn't work, and there needs to be greater breadth to it. So I think having the confidence to do that. So Joe's session was particularly significant for me. I think your session around self as tool, I said that, one of the things I think was attractive in, or perhaps gave a sense of safety to the participants in my research, was speaking to somebody who probably got aspects of their story and their experience. And that was something that was quite clear within the context of my research and the conversations that I had through the semi-structured interviews that I'd conducted. So I think what that allows me to do as a coach, reflecting on myself, myself as tool, is to really consider the questions that I'm asking. And that's not to say that I'm asking questions that are a complete reflection of my own experience, but they maybe give me a possibility to frame my questions in a way that's likely to resonate more with my coachees. So I think that's not a given, and I think that's something that we have to work on. And I think, to assume that that is inevitable just because somebody I'm coaching might be neurodivergent and I'm neurodivergent would be naive. But I think that module opened up that point of reflection for me. And then I think, as Rachel said, the stuff that Dame Dr. Neslin Watson-Drew did with us around a time for thinking, that was really significant again, as I guess it speaks to what I've already said, but most of the people in my study had been diagnosed with ADHD in a 2 to 3 year period before the interviews were conducted. And very few of them had had the opportunity to actually think about what that meant for them. And so carrying that forward into a coaching conversation, allowing that period of thinking, and allowing that period of thinking to be as long as it needs to be. Because again, I sort of said often we can get very drawn into this seductive idea of coaching. It's like, and what are the actions that you're going to go away and work on today? Well, it's not, no, what are the things that you think that you need to go away and think about? And that process of thinking and changing people's thinking and allowing people to reflect, those are the actions and the outcomes of the coaching conversation. And that might be 10 sessions of thinking. And there's no doing at all. And I think certainly for people who are working out and going through a process of self-exploration and perhaps redefining who they are as individuals with more certainty about who they are, it is probably something which really resonated within that particular part of the coaching program.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? This idea that like if you look at traditional ways of thinking about coaching, it's where coaches only ask questions. They don't kind of share anything about themselves because that's meant to be, stealing the space and shifting the dynamic, and they don't offer solutions, and there's smart, there's goals that need to be worked towards, and someone must come away with something really tangible. But that's just not applicable to all coaching contexts and environments, is it? And sometimes I think just giving people that space, they just don't get it at work. Work's so busy, isn't it? You're so busy firefighting, back-to-back meetings, reporting your work, all the things that we have to do in daily work, that often for people coming into a coaching hour, it's like the one opportunity they get to just stop and to reflect upon who they are and how they are. And I think for me, like as someone who's been coaching for years and spends time having these conversations, it's easy to forget how little people generally at work don't have time for these conversations and the value of just holding that space for them.
And I think in that regard, Emma, and I think this is, I mean, I kind of listening to what Zoe's saying. It kind of there's a lot of commonality, I think, in terms of the themes that Zoe developed within her research and some of the things that I observed and developed as themes from my own kind of empirical data. But I think there's a need as well, particularly within the workplace context, for the kind of the received models of coaching to be challenged from it, from this inclusive perspective, because I think, and this isn't to denigrate performance related coaching, because I know that its value and I know that it
Yeah,
works. But I think very often if people assume that what they are going to be engaged in is something to do with performance, for a group of people, and particularly neurodivergent employees in the workplace, for whom performance is likely to have been an issue and is likely to have been judged unfavorably over the course of their life, their working career. If we're then saying, right, this coaching thing is all about performance, the idea then, if we look at what Caroline Katz was talking about in terms of barriers to meaningful coaching conversations, we've established a barrier before we've even started the conversation. So there is a need to deconstruct some of the kind of received, or not deconstruct, but adapt. And I think this is why Joe's work is so important, that we say, look, we can take something like Grow and we can just tweak things around the edges, because in tweaking these things around the edges, that opens up the possibility to start a conversation with somebody for whom that conversation may not have been possible, not even to open that conversation in the first place.
yeah, absolutely. And for me, this is bringing up a conversation that I had with someone just very recently who is studying relational mindfulness. And I know in the self as tool conversations that we had, we talked about mindfulness and compassion and focusing. And by offering a coaching space as a being space rather than a doing space, it's very different. So, a doing space is that performance coaching. It's like, right, how can you do better? Whereas a being space is, oh, okay, how are you being? And, how is that for you? What's happening here? And it takes away the kind of striving that certainly a lot of neurodivergent people have. But as Zoe's highlighted, that's the same for people from minoritized ethnic backgrounds, because of that thing about having to work harder because of the judgments that come unfairly to you as someone marginalized due to your ethnicity. And the same, I guess, Rach, applies in terms of people with chronic health conditions as well. There's that I imagine, and from my own experiences, know that with health conditions bring this desire to prove that you're there because of what skills you have to offer, and yet there's so many other complications that get brought in, aren't there? It reminds me of the conversation we had recently, Rachel, around being, why are you here, and what are people commenting on? And you wrote a blog about people commenting on you as an individual who's got a set of circumstances versus the work that you produce. And this all feels quite resonant to me, really.
Yeah, whilst I've been listening to you, I was sat there thinking how much it resonates with both my own experience and the experiences of individuals that I do work with in the health and inclusion space, because it is definitely a challenge of identity and where how you are seen versus what you actually are is a constant challenge that people face. And so having, that coaching space to kind of address that and really sort of explore yourself in the environment that you find yourself in, I think is just really valuable. Because then if you can understand yourself first in that coaching space within a trusted environment, then it enables you to go out and be yourself more fully in the workplace in other scenarios, and perhaps challenge people's perceptions of you in the future. But I think it's really important that you have that safe, collaborative thinking space to do all that work, to then be able to,
it's like a strengthening up place, isn't it?
yeah,
A shoring up of self.
definitely.
Yeah. So let's move on a bit, because we had some questions from the public. There's three that I want to bring, so let's see where we go with these. Interested in hearing everyone's perspective, but this one might initially be more of a space for Rachel to respond to. So it's a bit of a long question, so bear with me, but it's a really interesting question. So someone's written in and said, I wonder why coaching isn't something HR companies turn to for executives with disabilities. They're often quick to turn to occupational health for the logistical and tap the EAP, which is an employee assistance program, a kind of counselling space, both of which are great. But it's still unusual for them to trigger coaching to help integrate the work with the disability or chronic condition. As such, executives with disabilities are underrepresented in corporate life and are often pushed out of executive work altogether, or to the consulting, freelance, self-employed circuit where they can self-support. What's missing from the HR playbook? So, Rach, this sounds like it's got your name on it.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So when I saw this question, I thought I've noticed this too in a lot of my work. And I think, first of all, it's drawing on what Tom's just been talking about and what you have said as well about that doing space and that being space, and how coaching is still often framed as a performance tool rather than a relational or a personal growth tool. So when disability or chronic health come into the conversation, it's typically treated as a support issue, so a practical thing that we need to offer support. We need to find the solutions to make the accommodations that are needed. And they don't always take a step back and think about the wider needs of that individual from a relational or a social or an environmental perspective. Like, what can we do practically to support a person in an organization? There's a set of rules, we'll follow them, we'll make some accommodations, job done. And so that's where I think coaching kind of gets overlooked, because it doesn't necessarily fall into that accommodations category. And I think EAP programs and occupational health are all really valuable tools for that practical side, but there's that human element, that personal growth element, those conversations with the individual about who they are, what they can bring, what they need to bring their best self. All those things, I think, just kind of get pushed to the side once the tick box has been done. Well, you asked for that and you need this to be able to work. Therefore, we've tried to give you that, so off you go. And it kind of stops there. And I think, so for me, what's missing from the HR playbook is an understanding that coaching is a space for exploration, not just adjustment, not just for improving performance. It's about really getting to grips with who someone is and what they really need. And it relates a lot to my work in difficult conversations. I think there's a general reluctance across all levels of organisations to engage in conversations that are difficult, hence my research. anything that's deemed a bit challenging or a bit sensitive or a bit complex, or that we don't necessarily feel equipped with the right language or the right knowledge to maybe engage in that conversation, we'll automatically shy away from and avoid, and we'll focus on the things that we think we can do, i.e. we can put in accommodations, but actually me having a conversation about your disability might be really awkward for me because I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I'm scared of making a mistake or upsetting you or getting it wrong. So there's all those fears around disrupting the relationship, and therefore those conversations get avoided. And so for me, I think I see coaching as the bridge for that. It sort of provides that structured, supportive, almost like a container for that vulnerable conversation to happen from both perspectives, for the individual with the health condition or the disability, but also someone within their organisation, to have those conversations in that supportive environment where they can tackle the things that they're scared of talking about, and then really get to know what it is about that person that's needed. And when done inclusively, it could really support executives to integrate their lived experiences and navigate the challenges that they face and all those sorts of things, and find clarity. So I think the fear is the big thing. Coaching could be a really, really helpful way of navigating that fear, and overcoming some of those barriers, I guess.
Yeah. So listening to you speak, like for me, I get a real sense of, like you say, they're both really helpful to have, like an EAP program or the occupational health, but they're things that are going on almost behind the scenes. So it's like off you go and speak to the EAP in your own space, in your own time, and that's like a space for you to talk about what's difficult for you, but it's probably not particularly solutions focused. And then occupational health will be looking at pragmatic solutions that can be put into place. But for coaching, it's the coaching conversations can empower, enable, whatever word you like to use, individuals to then show up and have those conversations with their colleagues, like you've been saying, Rach, whereby then it becomes a thing that colleagues discuss together, and it becomes forefront rather than I'll deal with this out of the way so it doesn't inconvenience anybody. But actually, that's not okay, is it? That's not enough. It needs to be done together. You need to do it in the collective rather than one individual with the support of others dealing with it in their own space and then showing up like everybody else does to work. Because it's just not a reality,
And I
is
think
it?
it links back to some of what Zoe was saying about her research as well. There's those barriers and those walls that people come against, but also they learn to see themselves through the lens of other people because that's the
Yeah,
narrative that they hear, or that's the experience they hear. And so you kind of almost hold back in some senses in some scenarios because you don't necessarily deem yourself good enough to be in those executive positions because you've got limitations, or because you need more flexibility,
yeah,
or because you're not as reliable. And all of these messages start to kind of knock down your own perceptions of your capability, and it's something that I experienced through my own lived experience. It really challenges you to kind of think about what you can actually bring to the table, and I think without having had coaching conversations, it can be really difficult to challenge yourself, to
yeah,
question those assumptions or those those stories that you've heard and that you're now telling yourself. Um,
yeah, yeah. So I can
Can I
tell that,
just,
yeah,
yeah,
Tom
sorry,
wants
I
to
just
come
want,
in.
I do, I've been itching. Yeah, there's just a couple of bits there that I think that kind of pick up on what Rach is saying, in as much as, why don't HR look to coaching at certain points? And I think part of that, I think, is what we've been discussing really in terms of the parameters of this coaching program, is the possibility that coaching is something beyond performance. And I think where we have people in certain situations where people are perhaps struggling in the workplace, if we're seen to be putting coaching in place and that has an overt focus on performance, then actually that's probably high risk, or it's perceived to be high risk. Whereas if we open up this conversation about what the possibilities of coaching are, and we start to challenge the kind of received models of coaching, then the application of coaching as a complement to things like employee assistance programs and other kind of interventions that are available actually start to become stronger. And I think, one of the things that we know as psychologists specializing in the workplace is we've never, or very rarely, recommend a single intervention that operates at a particular level. So this isn't a specific individual or team or organizational level intervention. There needs to be something complementary going on here. And understanding how coaching can complement and add to some of the other things that organizations do is probably around HR confidence in seeing it as a tool that is able to do a job other than the job people think it is intended to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So putting any one intervention or solution as the solution is risky. So a bit more of a systemic consideration of what's supporting individuals, and not just sending people off, right, off you go, have this solution, and then come back when you're fixed and ready and everything will be fine. It's just, that's not okay. So I'm going to move on to our next question. I'm going to come to one that I think Zoe will be a good person to respond to this one. So someone's asked us, many organizations are investing in DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. Where does coaching fit in, and what makes it a meaningful tool rather than just another tick box?
That's a good question, and I think it just follows on nicely from what we talked about. How do you actually see coaching? Coaching is not just all about performance; it's also about the being and developing the person. And I think within a DEI context, it's important to have coaching in organizations for them to start seeing the importance of coaching as a development tool, not just referring people for coaching, probably if they're not doing well in their performance, but and when they start seeing coaching differently as a performance, or sorry, a development tool, or then it becomes something that would benefit every member of the organization. So it becomes an inclusive tool that they can use and make available for different people to develop however they want in their career, whatever their career intentions are, and not just something that's available for a specific use. So this is how I think that coaching can be used to support inclusivity, to support diversity and equity in an organization. So if for instance, an organization understands this importance of coaching and then makes it available in their internal coaching platform. So, for instance, somebody like from my research, someone who's having difficulties and not being seen, not being heard, if they see that there is that availability that they can go through coaching, they will take it up, because coaching otherwise sometimes can be not very accessible
Yeah.
sometimes because of how much it costs and things like that. So if people went to individually get coaching, it can be quite expensive. But to support people in an organization, people from underrepresented groups, and every other person, not just people from underrepresented groups, to see it as a tool that would support people's career, not just because you want to improve their performance.
Yeah.
But another area for me is that it's quite important to have inclusive leadership and culture. And for me, this is the foundation of it, really. And when that exists or is built in an organization, then you understand the importance of your leadership and your managers having this coaching skills and being able to coach their team members, depending on what they feel that the need are. And it's very useful, like we've seen from Raters pointed out, it's not just coaches that use coaching skills. It's very beneficial for different people, and at work is a great
Yeah.
tool at work.
Yeah. Yeah. So not just providing executive in external coaches, such as some of us offer, but a lot training people within organizations to become coaches to their colleagues, and training leaders, team leaders, managers to use coaching skills in their conversations. The very process of training people internally in coaching skills, particularly inclusive coaching skills, will create not only a coaching culture, but will enable people in the organization to understand each other better, and the importance of listening and not fixing, and seeing the world from different perspectives that aren't their own, because they're stepping out of that fixing mode and
That's right.
the doing mode, and they're going into
Yeah.
being mode with someone, or supporting someone else's being
Yeah.
mode. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add something else. I mean, I'll just bring my own experience into it, because in my organization, um, I have worked for different organizations, and in my current organization, um, it's just refreshing to know that I've got access to coaching, and not because I've been referred by my manager, but because
Mm.
I'm interested in exploring my career compass, whatever as they call it. And it's good to know that this is available to me, and I feel like I belong. I feel included. I feel uh, cared cared about.
Yeah.
So it does
Theme.
make an absolute difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Zoe. So let's move on to our last question, and then let's wrap up. So, Tom, I think this is probably one that might have your name on it. What does inclusivity in coaching actually look like in practice? And how do we avoid replicating existing power dynamics in coaching relationships?
I think, part of it at an organizational level is kind of understanding or accepting the possibility that coaching can be done differently. And I think it probably extends from what Zoe has just been talking about. So I think, one of the things for me, if we're talking about coaching within the context of the workplace and within the context of an organization, if coaching is going to be valuable, and if coaching is going to be allowed to become more inclusive, then I think on an organizational level, we need to understand how coaching is understood by the employees within the organization. Because if we assume that we know what our employees think about coaching without actually checking in and working out what the perception of coaching is, then we're not kind of doing our groundwork properly to even allow there to be a possibility that coaching is something different, that coaching could be something different. And I think there's probably an extent to which most people, I think, within a workplace setting have a perspective of coaching within the context of performance. So I think there needs to be a bit of reimagining, and there needs to be a bit of re-understanding and representing what coaching looks like. So how coaching is understood within this organization by everybody. And from that exploration of what is understood, maybe there's the need then to present some alternatives. And I think within part of that conversation, how coaching is offered and when coaching is offered, very typically, again, within the context of performance, the routes into coaching are probably quite well defined. So again, that's probably another rule book that a lot of organisations need to rip up. Is at what point and how individuals, where they see value in coaching, are able to then access that, and what they're able to access as a result of that. And so part of that for me is about personalising the coaching offer. I think if we have a very homogenous coaching offer, then that is likely for some people to feel a little bit exclusive in some shape or form. And I think just on a practical level, Anna, I think I'm sort of reflecting on one of my most recent kind of coaching sessions, which I really struggled with. And I found myself feeling uncomfortable that I wasn't moving the coaching conversation along in the way that I'd hoped. And so rather than kind of asking my way out of trouble, I'd kind of felt myself under pressure to start to answer my way out of trouble, and perhaps oversharing a little bit. And I managed to kind of check that. And the thing that really struck me in terms of doing it differently, making it inclusive, personalizing it to the needs of the coachee, rather than me just taking the model off the shelf and just sticking with that, is that maybe doesn't develop me, I think, as a coach. But the bit that was really significant is I was using goal setting theory in a lot of my conversations over the course of this coaching offer. And I specifically was using the word goal, and it just wasn't landing. And I wasn't seeing that it wasn't landing. And within one session, I used the word challenge instead of goal, and it completely sent the conversation in a totally different direction. And what I'd done there, and it's a really, really small example, but I think my habitual use of language wasn't hitting the mark. I was comfortable with it. And as soon as I introduced the word, I like a challenge, and it's like, right, okay, what challenge can we set? Because I'd spent 3 hours trying to set a goal. It wasn't going anywhere. As soon as we started setting a challenge, the whole coaching conversation went in a completely different dimension. So I think on all sorts of levels, when we talk about inclusive coaching practice, we need to, I guess, if we're looking at it from our perspective as workplace psychologists, what needs to happen at an organizational, team, an individual level, and as an individual coach within that space, what is it that I'm very familiar with that I need to become more uncomfortable with in terms of adopting other terminology, other approaches, because actually that's the bit that allows my coaching offer to remain as open as possible, because it means that I'm not shutting down.
Yeah. And for me, there's something there, because what we haven't covered is Roxine's session, which is about the starting points of coaching and contracting, and then recontracting, constantly recontracting with our coaching clients to make sure that what we're doing with them is in the right the right, like you say, the right language, the right focus, the right mindset, so that we're not just following our patterns, using our language. It's let's keep recontracting so that this is distributing the power between the coach and the coachee, or the coach and the team, and also the coach and the organization, in terms of recontracting with them at all points. Like, why are we here as coaches for the people in your organization?
Yeah, and
So
I think that bit of the ongoing process of contracting over the course of however many sessions you might have been contracted to offer with a coachee, part of that contracting for me comes out of the evaluation of the sessions, and allowing the coachee the opportunity to and allowing us the opportunity to learn from the coachee what has landed. So one of the things that I'll always ask, either at the end of a session or the beginning of a concluding session, is there a question that I asked you that particularly worked for you? And then actually try and understand, in terms of the way that question's been framed, there might be specific words in there that have worked, but that really means that we're continually addressing that kind of power dynamic, and allowing the coachee to see that we are really working hard to personalize the questions based on their need, rather than the things that are easy for us to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some really fascinating conversations. We could go on for longer. However, we are going to bring this one to a close for now. I want to say a huge thank you to all three of you for turning up today, sharing your personal experiences, your professional experiences, your research insights and expertise, and generally having a really fascinating conversation about how to challenge the status quo on coaching, how to make it inclusive, and how to offer something that maybe isn't offered as much as it should be out there in the world of coaching. So thank you very much.